Good evening and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns live stream here on YouTube and Periscope. My name is Tom Luongo. Got a lot to talk about. Sorry I missed you guys on Monday night, but could not be avoided. I was in no shape to live stream anyway. I spent the entire day moving. I spent a couple days down in South Florida for interesting. I'm sorry. I'm looking at what YouTube set up here, and it's telling me that it's not that this isn't right. I don't know. Whatever. How does everything look okay before we get started? Because YouTube is telling me that I'm dealing with an unsupported resolution, which doesn't seem to be right since I haven't changed anything. So, not really worried. We'll just move on. All right, so yeah, spent the first couple days this week helping a friend get things settled. In his neck of the woods was necessary, and it was my good deed for the month, guys. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, you wouldn't have gotten anything out of me anyway because, well, by 8 o'clock Monday night, I was like, yeah, why aren't we in bed? We'll just move on with that. All right. So with that out of the way, let's talk about everything that's happened since the last time we did this. I've got an article up on the website right now. Actually, I have two articles in the last couple of days. One on Brexit and one on what's going on with the Israeli government in the aftermath of the skirmish with Gaza, the Palestinians in Gaza over last weekend. And I did note when I was kind of persona non Tom for a few days that Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman resigned over the ceasefire agreement that was brokered by Egypt on Monday or whatever. And I noted it and I went, okay, that's interesting. And I really didn't have a chance to keep up with what was going on, so I had to spend some time the last couple of days really trying to get back into the groove of things. So I may be a little, I don't know, maybe a little disjointed here as you take a couple of days off from this stuff, and it's just all of a sudden you just feel horribly behind, no matter what you do. As much as you need the clarity, as much as you need to be able to step away from this stuff for a couple of days every once in a while, because if you don't, you just go crazy. When you do come back to it, you're like, oh my God, what did I miss? And at the rate that stuff is coming out these days, it's crazy. So before I get to Israel and what's going on there, because that's going to be, of course, controversial, let's talk about Brexit. Let's talk about Theresa May. Let's talk about what's going on. So in no way, manner, shape, or form am I surprised by what's going on with Brexit. I've said for, a year and a half now, that I felt Theresa May was put in charge to make Brexit as complicated as possible and to ultimately destroy it. That the whole point of these last 2.5 years have been nothing more than wear everybody out and delay and complicate matters and talk it to death and fearmonger and all of this stuff in order to get the people to finally go, okay, fine, let's have another referendum and see if we can get the vote right this time. We've seen this script before. Paul Joseph Watson complained about it in a video earlier in the week. Nigel Farage was on the floor of the UK Parliament complaining about it. Nothing has changed. The European project will move forward at whatever pace they want it to. Emmanuel Macron is out there. One day he's Trump's best friend. The next day he's saying, we need a grand army of the EU. Why do we need a grand army of the EU? Well, the United States isn't all that important to us anymore anyway. No, they need a grand army of the EU to stop Italy from seceding from the EU. Don't kid yourselves. That's what it's about. It's not about protecting them from the Russians. It's about enforcing Hotel California. And it's the same thing with Brexit. The Brits have absolutely all of the leverage in this affair. It had it from the beginning. They voted to leave. The European Union doesn't want them to leave. Right? The Brits run a $75 billion a year trade deficit with the EU. That's not including like City of London or any of the other stuff. Then we get into that, where so much of the clearing for euro denominated business happens in City of London. It doesn't happen in Frankfurt. Doesn't happen in Brussels. Doesn't happen within the EU borders. It happens in London. So if the Brits leave, that's going to change the dynamic of all of that. And they really want that business, under their own rubric. They don't want that outside of their control. They don't want the Brits, being able to unilaterally, tax or preferentially clear other transactions. I don't know what they're totally worried about here, or ultimately worried about here, but this is where the crux of this lies. And the whole thing with the Irish border is irrelevant. Because again, they're leaving. It's not up to Britain, to the UK, to enforce the EU's border. That's the EU's problem. That's Ireland's problem. Let them deal with it. And if they don't like the terms that the EU sets for the border, then maybe they should leave the EU. This is not that hard. The whole thing is designed from the ground up to be a big cock-up, and it's always been Theresa May's plan from the day this started to get to this moment. Here's the worst deal imaginable. It's like the Brexit bill, exit bill. It's like the Obamacare bill. 585 pages long. You think anybody's actually read the damn thing? You think they hammered that out last week and then wrote the thing? Come on, man. Give me a break. Of course not. The basic framework of this deal has been in place since the day after the vote. Tired of watching it. So very obvious who Theresa May works for. The fact that she's still trying to sell this thing and she's still trying to impersonate Margaret Thatcher just makes me howl with laughter. Because she's the exact opposite of that. She's not going anywhere. Of course she's not going anywhere. She's like Merkel. Not going anywhere either. Decorum says both of them should have stepped down ages ago. They don't have the confidence of anybody. They don't have the confidence of their own party. They don't have the confidence of the opposition party. They don't have the confidence of the people. People have told them both, go away and leave, and they won't leave. There's a reason why they won't leave. They won't leave because they're told not to leave. Because their job is to stay there and cock everything up. This is not rocket science. Not hard. And now she's placed a Faustian bargain in front of everybody and they're hoping that they can roll the dice and get enough Tories to not vote against her because they don't want Labour to come into power. Because they cocked all that up too to make the Tories look like a bunch of weak, ineffectual fools that are split. This is on purpose. And to try and make Labour the alternative. Like Jeremy Corbyn is out there thinking in some way that they're ever going to let him have the keys to 10 Downing Street. That guy's as delusional more delusional than the Broward County Supervisor of Elections, who thinks she can just willy-nilly steal an election because, racism. What the hell is wrong with people? Jeremy Corbyn's not going to be allowed to be anywhere near power. Labour, there are snap elections. If May is thrown out of power, and there are snap elections, do you think Corbyn's going to be in charge of Labour for 5 minutes after those votes are tallied? The British deep state likes him less than they like Theresa May. More delusional than Stacey Abrams. There you go. So, none of this is surprising. And this is all playing out exactly the way I feared. Not expected and feared. I hoped for another outcome, but unfortunately, ain't happening. What's going to happen here is exactly what we're expect to happen. I mean, look, they can go. The thing is that hard Brexit has always been the best option for Britain from the beginning anyway. The Tories in England are as bad, if not worse, than the Republicans. They hate winning. They despise winning because they're not supposed to win. They're just supposed to be the controlled opposition that looks like every once in a while they're allowed to win and give the people hope before it's crushed out of them like you crush a cockroach. I mean, just stick us into a mortar and just stick us into a pestle. What they're doing. It's what these people do every day. Every day. And every day, the challenge to their rule gets stiffer. And every day, they hang on harder. They still think they're in charge. They still think they've got this thing. Like they can somehow keep this legally running and it'll matter. They're going to keep the UK within the European Union so that they can all go down together when the whole thing collapses. I mean, I haven't seen a more clueless bunch of people ever in my life. And I've worked with some pretty freaking stupid people. But I got to tell you, the people who are in charge of the EU are pretty freaking dumb. I wouldn't put a dollar. I look, there are 4,000 crypto projects out there. Fully 3,900 of them are pure freaking scams. And I would put a dollar into them before I would ever put a dollar into anything having to do with Europe right now. And if you think, and this is the most important part, if you think that they're going to get away with this and it's going to be smooth sailing towards Orwellian panopticon, good news for you, it's not. The seeds of the sovereign debt crisis, the seeds of the rebuke of the institutional order is bound up in moments like this. It starts here. It accelerates from here. It's like them trying to steal Florida. Brazenly steal Florida. They've already stolen Arizona. Finally, the GOP in Arizona is going to throw up some half-assed friggin' challenge to the election. The whole friggin' election should be thrown out. All of Maricopa County's votes should be thrown out. Broward County should be completely disenfranchised. Same thing with Palm Beach. You guys can't friggin' follow the law? Fine. Nobody's votes get counted. Plus or minus. For or against Scott or DeSantis or anybody else. Nobody's vote counts. The only way you clean up the system is to disenfranchise everybody. Period. I don't give a shit if it's legal. At this point, it doesn't even matter if it's legal. But it should be legal. It actually probably is legal. That's the worst. That's the worst part about it. Those votes shouldn't be counted. I can almost bet you by Florida law, I haven't looked up the statutes, but I can bet you that Florida law is pretty freaking clear about this. Can't certify your election results. Your election results shouldn't count. And I was talking to a friend of mine over the weekend, speaking of Broward County. I don't even think Broward County is 70-30 Democrat. But they keep voting 70%, 70% Democrat year in and year out with the most corrupt election officials in the world. I mean, guys, they make freaking we're making Venezuela look good at this point. They've got a bus driver installed as president. who's destroyed the country. Maduro's the bus driver, for Christ's sake. Okay? And Brenda Snipes, Scott Israel, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I honestly believe Broward is probably more like 57-43 Democrat, but they cheat 13 to 15% every election in order to try and turn Florida blue by administrative fiat. The only one good thing comes out of this election is that they so brazenly cocked the whole thing up in both Broward and Palm Beach and probably Miami-Dade and probably Orange. And I'll bet you even Duval. Duval County went freaking blue, for Christ's sake, in this election. I got news for you. It's Republican Central up there. Every lib friend that I know who lives in Jacksonville, it's like, oh my God, it's nothing but Republicans up here. Shoot me now. That's all they ever say. I'm like, and then Duval County comes out 52-48 for Nelson and Gillum? Really? Really? Okay. And it's the same thing in Europe. They want a second referendum so bad so they can cheat that thing out of they can cheat that thing into oblivion. The problem with the last Brexit vote is they didn't cheat hard enough because they didn't think it was going to pass. They believe their own press clippings. I'm just reading some of the comments at this point. RB Tools, I want you to understand that the British deep state is far more powerful than the Australian deep state. Corbyn is there as a placeholder. He's there to rally the freaking socialists. But when it comes to actually wielding power, that will not happen. It won't happen. They'll turn on him in a heartbeat. They were already prepping Tony Blair for him to replace Corbyn a year and a half ago during the last snap elections because they expected Labor to win. I mean, if nobody understands what happens in the snap elections that Theresa May called last year, it's this. She called snap elections because the Tories had a Brexit scuttling proof majority. There were too many Brexiteers in Parliament. So Theresa May, dutiful stooge of the globalist Davos crowd, sons of bitches who think they run the fucking world, calls for snap elections and then doesn't campaign. A series of horrific terrorist attacks happen across London. She campaigns on cutting pensions and looking weak on terrorism. That's what the Tories run on. And they lose 30, 40 seats? As opposed to shoring up her government, and then she just refused to campaign. She ducked interviews. She was persona non grata. I never saw such an openly. It was the worst campaign I'd ever seen. And I thought Ron DeSantis was running the same kind of campaign in Florida until Trump, blew smoke up his ass and said, "Get out there and freaking campaign, you dumbass. You're going to let this freaking asshole win? What the hell's wrong with you?" No. Corbyn is a true indicted and ideologue, RB Tools. RB Tools is saying he's a bit like Trump then. He'll be elected and then whipped into shape by the real movers and shakers who scheme in the shadows. No, he will be replaced by someone they can trust. The Brits don't have a democratic system. Okay, they don't. It's mean, don't get me wrong about the bus driver comment. Yeah, there are plenty of smart bus drivers out there. There are plenty of smart Uber drivers and whatever you guys are talking about. Maduro isn't one of them. Okay? Let's just get that cleared up. Nicolas Maduro is not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Period. All right. And all of this is undermining, at a fundamental level, everybody's faith in all of these institutions. You undermine the faith in the institutions, you undermine the faith in the currency. If you undermine the faith in the currency and the institutions to actually do their job, then you undermine their ability to pay back and service the debt and keep paying the coupons, which allows the currency to maintain its value. What happens then? User 13. No way pro-Palestinian Jeremy Corbyn gets anywhere near real power. Yes! So, I don't know. Yeah, Joanne, that's the last time you'll ever see an election that transparent, because they really did think they had it in the bag. Joanne Leone is reminding us that the Brits counted the Brexit referendum was about as transparent as you can get. No, actually, I think the way the Russians did their elections were pretty freaking transparent. They had cameras in every freaking voting place. We just wait till the whole thing's on the blockchain. They're already experimenting with blockchain-based elections in Russia. Oh, by the way. Another point to be made about all of this is that our election system here in the United States is cocked up and prone to malice and all the rest of it on purpose. That's a feature, not a bug. Because how else are you going to cheat? If you tighten the friggin' election systems up, how else are they going to cheat? I mean, these are people who honestly believe they are entitled to rig elections in their favor. That's the world we live in. The British deep state probably murdered Joe Cox, which is insane. If you remember, Joe Cox was the woman killed right before the Brexit vote took place. No, Rocket Man, it's not several. It's close to a dozen. They have stolen close to a dozen seats since election night. Okay? And they nearly got the Senate back down to 51-49 so that Mitt Romney could be the freaking deciding vote. And then Mitt Romney can lean on Mike Pence and we can get a 25th Amendment challenge against Trump. That's what they were planning for. That's what they were expecting. And that's how bad it is. That's where we are. Speaking of Trump, let's talk about this guy. So now let's talk about what happened last weekend. Because what's going on in Israel, and I'm going to have to sit down and talk with Halsey about this, get his take on it. My take on it, I absolutely encourage you to read a couple of articles over at Moon of Alabama that Bernard has published this week. There's also a really good article over at Strategic Culture, which came from Mint Press News. That give a slightly different version of both events. I have links to that stuff in the article that I posted on my blog over Gold, Ghosts, and Guns today. Trump is rapidly being put into a very, very bad position on foreign policy. Very bad position. Project Netanyahu is pretty much dead. Article from Alistair Crook from a couple of weeks ago discussing this. I've linked to it in other places. I've mentioned it before. Go find it. Just Crook, Strategic Culture, Project Netanyahu. Put it into your search engine of choice and you will find it. And read the article very carefully. that plan has failed. And with the attacks, with the skirmish back and forth between Palestinians and the Israeli Defense Forces over last weekend, depends on who you talk to, depends on what side of the fence you're on, but it looks like the following occurred. I really do think Bernard's takeover at Moon of Alabama is the right one, reading between the lines, which is that the Israelis got surprised by the ferocity of the strike back against them from the Palestinians. In the same way that they were surprised in 2006 by the fierceness of Hezbollah's defense when they tried to invade Lebanon. This keeps happening to them. And they're not in a position to strike back whole hog because of what User 13 just brought up. The Israelis can't hide soldiers laughing as they shoot unarmed kids anymore. It's everywhere, and not only Americans, but Europeans as well are damn sick of it. So, the worst part about all this is that Netanyahu, who you all know I have no love for Bibi, is going to wind up being the voice of moderation in Israeli politics right now. That should scare you. Because Lieberman, the defense minister, resigned because Netanyahu signed a ceasefire brokered by Egypt because it was necessary to do so. Otherwise, if it escalated, it would have been worse for Israel. Which highlights what we've been saying on and off. As frustrated as I get with Israel, and I have gotten frustrated to no end over the last year and a half, because I've expected something like this to happen. That at some point, all of this, the idea, the myth of Israeli air superiority and invulnerability was going to go away. It was all bluff, all bluster. Their strategic position is poor. And I had no problem with Trump giving them cover. To a point. And the point is the same problem that once they had an inch, they tried to take everything. Thing with the Saudis. They gave a vote of confidence to MBS, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He then went freaking crazy. Yemen, blockading Qatar, doubling down on adding more, on paying for mercenaries and Salafist head chopping animals in Syria, bringing in his entire family and shaking them down and torturing them in the Riyadh Ritz-Carlton, having journalists killed, all of this stuff. And it's insane. They went, as always, they overplayed their hand. My frustration with all of this is that this should have been negotiated down to the point where we are now a year and a half ago. It's why I got so angry when Trump was maneuvered into striking airfields in Syria in successive Aprils. That was not going to make it easy for him to cut a deal and make everybody happy. But the problem is that nobody in Washington and nobody in New York or Las Vegas, Sheldon Adelson, want peace. Jared Kushner pushed a plan peace, which is untenable. And it's not going to work for anybody. And so now Trump is stuck. And he was also sold on, we're going to get this plan in place, just to split the Palestinians between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Qatar on one side, the Saudis on the other. And then eventually divide and conquer, and then eventually wipe them out. The world is sick of it. The Saudis, this is part of the reason why the Saudis have been outed for who they are. It's why the media's turned on them, because in order to get at Trump, they're now allowing the media's turning on both Saudi Arabia and Israel. Right, Thordoom. That's the point I'm about to get to. Thordoom is reminding me, as a Tom and now Zero Hedge. There's an article on Zero about the CIA saying MBS ordered the killing of Khashoggi. Of course he did, but this is a CIA play to weaken Trump and get rid of MBS because he was not groomed by the CIA. Yeah, that ties into all this. Weakening MBS, removing the Saudis' media cover. Same thing with Israel. That's all ploy at trying to stop Trump from implementing his plan, which is not a tenable plan in the first place. Right? The whole thing is kaput. And now the real negotiation has to happen. Because look, the Russians and the Syrians and the Iranians have been running, they've been running the United States into the ground. They've been running rings around Trump on this, and Netanyahu. It was Egypt that brokered the ceasefire. And if you read between the lines of the Israeli statements, pretty sure that Netanyahu understood that he had to go along with it. And the fact that Lieberman resigned and the hardliners behind him are all threatening fire and brimstone tells you that the situation is really bad. Right. The Trump's Middle East plan equals Kushner, which equals no plan. So that plan is kaput. Now, if you remember, I've been talking about there being what's on the table has to be a grand bargain in the Middle East, but not the way Netanyahu wants it. But this plan to destroy the Palestinians this way and to continue to keep Syria as an open wound was designed to drain Iran while the United States put massive economic sanctions on them and then eventually starve them out. It was meant to be an economic quagmire that was going to go on in perpetuity until the Iranians finally rolled over. Obama talked about this when he was in power, that if Russia moves into Syria, we'll just make it miserable for them and we'll just turn it into a big quagmire. Excuse me. And look and it didn't work. Obama talked about this stuff. It was in the New York Times and everything else. And the Russians came in and within 3 weeks, they turned the whole friggin' world, turn the whole war around. I remember arguing with my editor at Newsmax about this and saying, look, this is not going to be hard because the people backing the separatists at this point are the Americans, and the Americans cannot. And she just lost her mind. I said, look, that's what's going on. And the minute the Russians start fighting, the minute the Russians start flying sorties, the Americans have to back off and can't provide air cover for ISIS anymore, and the whole thing ends. And she was like, that's not what's going on. I'm like, you watch. A month later, we sat down for the next issue having our monthly phone conversation. That's exactly what happened. And she was like, we're right. I'm like, I know I was right. I'm always fucking right. It's exactly what's going on here. The quagmire is all on the American side, the Israeli side. That's the quagmire. And yes, Turkey is the wild card in all that. Because Erdogan wants to be Sultan. Erdogan wants to lead the Sunni world, and he doesn't want the Saudis in charge anymore. So it's all really fascinating what's going to happen here. Netanyahu's coalition is hanging by a thread. I don't know that if he's done politically yet, but it's really close. If he doesn't put Bennett in charge of, Naftali Bennett in charge of defense, he's going to pull his party from the coalition, at which point to snap elections. Netanyahu's Likud party only controls 30 seats. He's in a broad coalition with like 3 other parties. Remember, there's 18 parties in friggin' Israeli Knesset right now. Crazy. So when you look at this, the Palestinians turned around and said this is a great political victory for Gaza. And the article at Mint Press News from I can't remember the name of the writer, said no, it's only going to means that the Israelis are going to the hardliners are going to make it even worse, and there's going to be even more killing. Well, yeah, there may be, and if there is, that just plays right into their hands anyway. It's going to make the Israelis look like a bunch of butchers, and it makes the situation worse. And that's why Netanyahu called for the ceasefire. Try and stop all this. MJ Stoyanovich, I know Erdogan is dreaming. No Arab wants to see the Turks in charge of anything ever again. I know he's dreaming. I get it. But he has a plan, and he's going to do what, he's going to do, but he's going to do what he's going to do. So going over some of the comments here. No Muslim nation wants peace with the Jews. I should know that. I do know that they don't want peace, but no more do the Jews want peace with them. You have to understand that this goes both ways here. But there's a framework here. If the United States keeps to its agreement and backstops Israel unreservedly, but in a way that keeps Israel bottled up behind its own borders and not always looking for an opportunity to expand and overthrow their neighbors, well, then everything will be fine and everything will eventually calm down. But that's not what ever happens. Once they get any kind of that's not what happens. And we know this. But so much of this, and this is a point that User 13 brings up all the time, and I'm going to bring up again, which is the following. And that is that American support for Israel is a generational thing. And that generation is the baby boomers, and they're not in charge anymore. Gen X is in charge. The millennials are standing behind them, and neither one is willing to sacrifice another dollar for Israel. The gestalt, in the broadly speaking, is that my generation doesn't care. Okay? The biggest ideologues of this unreservedly pro-Israel position in the United States is a function of the baby boomers. And it's going to go away over time. And so, Bibi can't overplay his hand here. And if Bennett wants to start, if they can't control the narrative. It'd be bad for them. And I'm not wishing ill will on anybody here. I just am not going to sit here and listen to only the Israeli side of the problem, because the argument is really, this is the plan. We're going to do this. We've got this plan to destroy the Palestinians effectively, get Israel everything it wants, and keep Syria an open wound in order to get Iran to go home. And we're going to put and we have to put economic pressure on Iran in order to try and get them to back off. Well, the problem with that is if you don't think that the Russians and the Iranians and the Chinese didn't game plan this, then you're nuts. Then you're as delusional as John Bolton, thinking that the MEK can run Iran. I'm telling you, this is like this whole thing just feels like, I don't know, pick your metaphor, queen sacrifice or whatever. It just feels like it just feels like one of these classic Russian cauldrons where they suck you in to overextend yourself. Trump throws every freaking sanctions game in the books, right? You understand what I mean by the Russian cauldron, right? Let's back up for a second. The Russian military strategy is usually very simple, right? The Russians attack a weak point, right? Or they leave a weak point in their line to allow their opponents to take territory from the middle, and then they collapse around them and create a cauldron. So you come in through the middle, you take some territory. The Russians come in and they surround you from the backside. You cut everybody, you cut off their escape, and boom, you're done. Same thing when they're attacking. They do the same thing. They break open an area. And then they break open and surround and surround and surround and surround. And that's the way they work. The Russians are very, very skilled at this. It's it's their mindset. And they do this, and Putin's been doing it in foreign policy, using the same goddamn tactics. You allow his opponents to overextend themselves. It's judo. You allow them to overextend themselves. And Trump is way out over his skis right now in terms of sanctioning the world. Okay? Way out over his skis. This is not maintainable. If he thinks that this is going to be in place for 5 years from now and that the world has not moved away from whatever the fuck it is he's doing right now, he's out of his mind. And he's not fit to be president. Dead serious. You've got about a 6-month window where sanctions can be the most effective. So if the mullahs aren't out of power by February, the mullahs aren't leaving power. Okay? In the case of an extreme hybrid war attack on a currency, like what happened with the lira earlier in the year or Qatar last year, if the first 2 weeks don't produce the desired effect, the country will survive. The currency will survive. The worst of it will be over. Mark my words, it happens all the time. Doesn't matter how many headlines you write, doesn't matter how many futures contracts you dump, doesn't matter how many friggin' swap contracts you take out. You cannot. If you can't destroy your opponent and get him to sue for peace in the first 2 weeks of a currency war, currency, it's over. Russians, it didn't work. All of them doesn't work. I'm telling you, the Iranians have been through this too many times. They're baiting the Americans to do this shit. They're almost inviting it, guys. It's like what I would do. I'm like, Trump's going to leave the JCPOA, but Netanyahu's going to tell him sanction the crap out of him. What do we got in response? What do we do? Exactly what you're seeing. Rocket Man. Putting Islamic commies in charge of Iran would be even worse than the current mullahs. Duh. So yeah, I know you guys are talking about Melania getting that woman fired, the assistant chief of staff. I didn't really follow anything about it. My wife was trying to talk to me about it this morning, and I was trying to talk to her about Israel, and we were talking to cross purposes and wound up getting into an argument because neither of us were listening to each other. But that said, I had no idea that this woman was a child of Nazi collaborators or anything. I don't even know who she is, to be honest with you. So Scott Colvin asks the most interesting question of all, or the most salient question, which is, does Syria stay together or does it fracture? Oh, it stays together. Watch the war of attrition play itself out now. Watch the Americans over the course of the next, it may take a year or two. First, you'll see us leave Al-Tanf. Then Erdogan will move east of the Euphrates River. And it'll just slowly but surely, it's going to grind everything out. The same thing's happening in Afghanistan. The Taliban went to Moscow for the summit, which the Americans, by the way, sent somebody to. First time in 2 years of the negotiations with the Taliban going on. Finally sent somebody to the talks. Not a high-ranking official, certainly not Mike Pomposity himself, but or anybody interesting. The Taliban were there. Already had multiple discussions with Mattis and Pompeo and the rest of them, and they all said the same thing. We'll talk about peace when you fucking people leave. We will not talk about peace. There is no way there will be peace as long as Afghanistan is occupied. So you can continue to pour money in and appoint viceroys and outsource the war from the DOD to get it off the budget, but it's not going to matter. The war will never end, and we will kill you all. Or there can be peace, and you can get the fuck out. That message has been heard loud and clear. The United States wants to end the war in Afghanistan, but still wants to leave all its troops there. Happen. All they have to do, and the same thing in Syria, all they have to do is wait us out. And they will. Sanctions are a suicide plan for the USD and for the US dollar and the USA standing in the world. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. It'll take some time. There's just too much infrastructure that's in the dollar. Thordoom. Tom, the funny part is that I read somewhere today that despite the sanctions, Russian-U.S. trade is up 8% this year. Yes, it is. I saw that last week. And that the U.S. is still buying Yamal LNG from Russia. Yes, we are. While we sell ours to Poland. It makes no sense whatsoever. Who should Trump get Middle East advice from? Anyone other than the people he's currently getting it from. The first thing he should do is fire Mike Pompeo. Second thing he should do is hire somebody willing to pick up the goddamn phone and call the Iranian foreign minister and have a conversation about anything. The weather would be a good start. But Pompeo is an embarrassment. He's a stain on this administration. Putting it all together, Trump has got to immediately start reversing course on all of his foreign policy initiatives. Understand that his plan for the Middle East, done. Not the Kushner plan, not going to work. And immediately start the next, extricating himself from this situation. If he doesn't do that, he's done. Because again, it's like, look, let's explain. Theresa May negotiated a Brexit deal that if that had been Jeremy Corbyn negotiating that deal, Jeremy Corbyn would have come up with exactly the same deal. Jeremy Corbyn doesn't actually want to leave the European Union. She actually negotiated a deal Labour and the progressive Labours would be happy with. But he's not going to back her plan because she's of the wrong party. Political purposes. Same thing going on with Saudi Arabia and Israel. It's not like the deep state is against Israel and Saudi Arabia being satraps of the U.S. or the U.S. being satraps to them. It's that it's the wrong people who are in charge, so they have to be removed and their people reinstalled. Then everything can go back to normal. Then the Saudis can continue to butcher people willy-nilly, and the Israelis can starve Palestinians. No one will care. Never make the front page news. That's what's going on here. So is the Chinese and the Russians behind this pushing for the New World Order system as well? It's not really a New World Order. It's a multipolar world. It's a different thing. The United States is trying to hold on to the unipolar world where the petrodollar is king, just to keep it a shorthand. Did I see that the Pentagon failed the audit? Yeah, they didn't expect to pass. They were surprised they didn't fail as badly as they did. Only in the Department of Defense and the most bureaucratic of the nightmares would that have been considered a win. Joanne Leon, maybe there will be a silver lining in that Trump will realize neocon foreign policy is completely batshit crazy and suicidal. Why it took this long, God only knows. Well, yeah, because Trump is thick and not that smart. What do you think of Trump's smackdown of Macron? It was humorous. Trump is still good for entertainment purposes, but until he actually cleans up his foreign policy, he's not going to get anything domestically done because the GOP sabotaged the House and they all sat there, like they didn't know. This is what really has me pissed off, and we're almost done, so I'm going to leave it here soon. This is what has me really pissed off. It is not like these guys didn't fucking know they were going to try and steal at least 3 Senate seats and 2 governorships. Is anybody here surprised that the Democrats did this? Is anybody listening to my voice or who will listen to my voice surprised about any of this? No. So where the fuck was Trump? I mean, you have people. Where was the GOP and the state parties? Where were any of these people? Sitting on their fucking thumbs with them jammed up their asses going, yeah, no, we don't want to win. Fix was in from the beginning, guys. Imagine my shock. The Taliban might negotiate a face-saving exit for us. If they do, we should take it. Would involve keeping a base there, most likely. Sure, as long as it's small and it's small and surrounded, it doesn't matter. Are the sanctions really a Machiavellian plan to destroy the neocons? When they fall, blame Pompeo and Bolton and fire their ass. Sweep the neocons out and get Kushner the hell out of the White House. Okay. For 2 years, I've been saying that Donald Trump is not playing 4D chess. I've been saying this for 2 years. Every time I've ever accused him of doing anything close to 4D chess, I have gotten my ass handed to me. Julian Assange, this, that, Dana Rohrabacher, all that. No, none of it. None of it is true. He is flying by the seat of his pants. He's instinctual. He is guided by the moment. He's got good instincts and bad advice. No. None of this is a big grand plan. People only. This is with the problem. I preach this when I preach this stuff when I analyze stock charts. Right. Those of you who know. Those of you who follow my who are subscribers and who followed my work for years, you know that I don't like drawing lines on charts. We argue about this stuff in on our Slack channel all the time. I'll put up people put up charts and head and shoulders patterns and lines and trend lines and all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, they're cute, but they're just pictures. Humans are really good at seeing patterns where there aren't there. We're really good at creating standalone complexes. We're really good at this stuff. We're really good at ascribing meaning, because that's what our brains do, to random events, to random coincidence. We're really good at it. So good that we delude ourselves into thinking there is shit going on. There has to be a plan. The Fed have to be, the guys at the Fed have to be closet Austrians. It's the only way they would ever run foreign policy. They have to have a plan, because otherwise they're just really stupid. And no one wants to admit that they're just really fucking stupid or incompetent. But okay. I mean, it's the same thing. Okay? And it's the same. Q is this manifestation of this idea. Always going to be some weird thing that the 4D chess club was going to morph into fucking QAnon. It was always that way. Israel does have nukes, and this is what scares me about a guy like Bennett. This is what I think what is actually putting. So this is Scott Colvin says Israel does have nukes. If they could get desperate, they in the future they're up against the wall. They'll use them. To their credit, they've never used them. But here's the problem, and I think that Netanyahu understands that this is where things are headed. If he fails here, because the hardliners in Israel, if they win the snap elections, then he's the voice of reason. And what happens? Because Bennett's talking like they're just children. We should shoot them. They're all terrorists. We should kill them all. We should drop bombs on all of them. I mean, he said this. This guy's crazier than John Bolton. Okay? At some point, can I give you the thoughts on the Dems stealing, Dems election cheating, on what that effect is going to have on the economy going forward? Well, right now, everything's kind of screwed. The Koch brothers paid off the Republicans not to contest the midterm elections, and the Koch brothers and Steyer and Soros are in alliance with each other to take this country down. Other than your spelling, because it's Koch brothers are spelled like Koch, K-O-C-H, you're right. That's what I've been saying for ever and a day for you. So you're right. I know that. Remember, the GOP doesn't want to win any more than the DNC wants to lose, right? They're two wings of the same bird of prey. And every time we see stuff like this, we have to realize that it's making more and more people throw their hands up in the air and go, who the fuck is in charge? What the hell's going on here? None of this makes any sense until you explain it to them and go, look, they're all in the same club. You mean the Democrats and the Republicans aren't enemies? No! You're the enemy. If at the poker table, if you can't figure out who the fish is, all right, guys, that sounds like a show. We're at an hour. If you like what you heard tonight, give a like and subscribe down below. I'll be back on Monday night at 8 o'clock, plus or minus 5 minutes, depending on my, how quickly I make coffee. Plus or minus 5 minutes, or on the 8 o'clock hour on Monday nights. I'm also here Friday nights, every Friday night at 8:30 as well. Follow my work over at goldgoatsandguns.com, and you can support my work over at Patreon/goldgoatsandguns, where you can sign up for either the private blog and twice weekly market reports and our private Slack server, or you can add to that the Gold, Goats, and Guns monthly investment newsletter, where I not only talk about the stuff that I'm talking about here, but there's exclusive commentary and exclusive insights as to what I think is going on in the world, along with stock picks and a variety of other things. You guys have a great weekend. Don't let this stuff get you down. Remember, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Be well and keep your stick on the ice.